So hello, welcome everyone on our stage, and welcome here Ondra, Polesný, and Martin, Macháček. They have a talk about Remix and about Gatsby and Next.js. Sorry. My name is Tomáš, and I will be host of this discussion. And the goal of this discussion is to find a winner between these three frameworks. And I'm a little bit unsatisfied that we don't have enough people, because I wanted to do some voting who is a fan of which framework, but we can try it. And I hope that at least one of you hands up for the question, who is fan of Gatsby? Okay.
I'm fan of everything, so.
Who is fan of Next.js? And Remix? Okay, so Martin, you have difficult decisions. No, it's difficult to make a decision according to you, because you are fan of everything. But I think that we should start with a simple question about if I have no knowledge about no of these three frameworks, and I would like to start with some of them. With which should I start, Ondra?
Okay, I would say I don't know Remix that much, to be honest. Yeah, so we have an expert on that here. But I would say if you're new, and depends on what you're looking at. But if you are a beginner and it's your first project, then I would probably say go with Gatsby, because you're likely not starting an enterprise level website, and the best benefits of Next.js will not come until you have a bit more experience and get further with the website. So I would say go with Gatsby, because you can build the website very quickly, and you quickly see the results of what you do. Mm-hmm. And at least that motivates me as a developer. When I work on something and I see the results right away, it motivates me to keep going, and then it's 3 AM. So.
Mm-hmm. Martin, do you think it's the same answer from your side? Or?
Yeah, mostly. Basically, if I would to go for a quick win, I would definitely choose Gatsby, because it has a lot of great plugins that basically you can create a nice web page nice and fast. But if you would be in a position where you should actually look for key knowledge inside of the web development, I would probably choose Remix as well. It also is, as I mentioned, focused on web standards. So basically, if you know a little bit of HTML, and you can actually use Remix quite easily. So it's like it depends on what you're trying to get.
Okay, Ondra in his presentation explains how difficult it was, or that Gatsby has some limits, and they had to migrate from Gatsby to Next.js, and maybe you were talking primarily about advantages of this new framework. Let's see about Remix. But what are the biggest disadvantages of these frameworks? Maybe let's start with Remix, because Remix looks like no disadvantage. Everything is nice, beautiful, but probably there are
sunshine and unicorns basically. But the huge disadvantage of Remix is that it's new. It's basically half a year. It's open sourced, so it's still pretty new to the market. And there are not many production websites that are built on top of that. So Remix is still getting there. There's a huge marketing campaign. Everything looks nice, but it still needs to grow up a little bit. If I can say
maybe
that.
Are there any websites built on Remix now? Some famous or something what we can know?
Well, for example, the Ken C.'s website, basically, that's built on Remix. When he started in Remix team, he basically rewritten his web page in Remix, and it still looks nice. It's still fast, so good.
Okay, so if something is new, so it's okay, it's disadvantage, but technically are there any disadvantages or something what's bad on Remix?
Basically, Remix is focused on server-side rendering, and only server-side rendering. So whenever you just want to have a simple gem stack all generated and just serve it on some engines, then Remix is not for you, basically. So that's one thing that I can think of, because a couple of projects that we actually had the requirement that it has to be served from engines. So that's automatically strikes Remix out. So that's my deal.
Okay, Ondra, the same question about Gatsby, maybe next.
The biggest disadvantages. I would say in Gatsby, it's the biggest advantage is also its biggest disadvantage. Yeah, because when you need to scale it, the Gatsby is the fact that they use the local node storage for data delivery into the implementation is something that really limits how it can scale. Yeah, because then you still have to keep all the nodes in there intact, and that's something that Next.js simply doesn't suffer from, because it doesn't tell you how you should get data. It gives you the options and lets you do whatever you want. Yeah, so it's much easier to scale in that case. The biggest disadvantage of Next.js is probably the learning curve, because it's not that easy to set everything up. And if you're just creating a smaller project, the time that is needed to get everything up and running, like if you have multiple projects, it's fine, yeah, because you usually reuse the base. But if it's your first project and you want to do something small, with all the rendering modes and everything around in the ecosystem, it's really hard to get everything good the first time. And if you're a beginner, you can be very easily overwhelmed with everything and to try to look for an easier framework, which is perfectly fine and valid.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Of course, if you have any question, please raise your hand and you can ask or just shout. Yes, we are primarily here for you, not for they are here not for me.
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know Remix until your presentation, and I'm using Next.js in a few of my projects, and I know that Next.js offers you good optimization for images and this kind of stuff, which is highly which are reflected to the CO of a page. Is something similar inside the Remix, which can be used for it, or you have to do this separately?
The image optimization is not there, I believe, so that's it. But you actually have a couple of other, let's say, third-party libraries or services that actually do a pretty good job with that. So you should basically every time split the content of the application and the actual assets onto a different site. Basically, Remix also has one great thing that I didn't mention in my presentation, and is that you can actually define the routes for assets inside of the structure as well. So basically, whenever you just want to have a route that always serves a PDF, you can basically create a component over there and point it to some location. We'll just serve the PDF from any resource. So this is like a decoupling of all the different parts. So yeah.
Okay.
If I answered your question.
Okay, thank you. If you have any additional, okay.
Yeah, I have one maybe a little bit more practical, according to the Remix, because I did some playing around. There are 3 starter stacks, or whatever they call it, like Indie, Blue, and I think Violet and Green. Maybe 4. I have no idea. I just read them through, and I had no idea which you want to start with. There's like one for POC, so I would probably would go this way. But if you were new to Remix, or if you were new to Remix, which one would you choose with your experience? Well,
Indie stack,
Indie, definitely.
Because, yeah, because that's like the baseline that they actually go with, and that's like the best fit for most of the applications. You mentioned like three stacks. That's correct. I don't know the names exactly, right? But Indie is the main one. Then there is another one which is on the bleeding edge. It's like with all of the different CDNs and like different architecture and deployments and stuff. So that's like if you want to be really fancy. And then there is another one which is focused on some like specific technology. I'm not sure what. I don't remember. Sorry, but from what I've seen, like in a couple of months, Indie stack was always the best fit for me. So I will go that way.
Cool. Thanks.
Martina, you mentioned that Remix is only server-side render, no other possibilities. Next has a lot of possibilities, but it's difficult to sometimes to find which one is the right one for a specific case. But is it? I read some article about running Remix on the edge. So maybe, because my question is how to scale or how Remix handle some peaks with of traffic. So if the running of the edge is the solution for this, or
yeah, basically and that's up to the developer. You should always strive to have the application stateless as much as possible, and yeah, that's like the main point to be able to scale. But the thing is that you can actually like scale the server side of the remix on whatever stuff you want, and the bottleneck basically becomes only the database. If you will just like have everything stateless, then it's fine. So I'm not sure how to like give any actual points, like pinpoints to what actually do and don't. But stateless is the answer. So
yeah. And are there any plans to add, for example, static site generation in Remix?
Yeah, no.
Oh.
There are no, and that's basically the key point in Remix, that it is only server side and nothing else. So they are basically targeting a really specific, let's say, market of the web developers and projects.
Yeah, and when we are talking about running on the edge, maybe in Next, I read some news that probably some new features are prepared in Next framework, that something which can help developers and run on the edge. Do you know about this new technology which is coming? Something?
It's. I think you can see it on all the frameworks pretty much, because Edge is the new buzzword, and everyone wants to run code on Edge. Even though I'm convinced that many people don't even know what Edge stands for. But Edge has one great or one big limitation, and that is how long the function can actually be executed for. Yeah, and I think right now it's 50 milliseconds or something like that. Sure. And if your function needs more time, then it's going to be stopped. Yeah, so I think running in Edge, in majority of cases, running on Edge is not necessary, because you can have a simple serverless function. Yeah, I mean, developers want it, so the platform obviously just tries to react with what the developers want. And yeah, I've also heard some rumors and news that it's coming. We'll see how it's going to be used on production and how it's going to be priced, because right now it's on Cloudflare is actually very cheap. But I think that the actual usage is probably smaller than the hype around it.
Okay, we started with the question with which framework we should start, and you both answered that probably Gatsby. But let's imagine that I'm more experienced, so I can use Next or Remix. But with Martin, you have in presentation some table with the comparison and for which type of websites is which framework. Yeah. Because for me, I had a discussion about state of CMS, and in CMS is a total big mess, lot of types, and it's quite difficult to choose the right one. So, do you have any recipe how to choose the right framework for, let's say, some kind of projects? Because you did bad choice in the first attempt, let's say. So now, and your table probably wasn't like full. So I don't know. Let's imagine what parameters should I think about when I'm choosing, or probably choosing between Next and Remix? What?
You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. If you are just like focusing on Next and Remix, basically my main question would be, will we have just like some static content that we want to actually like serve as fast as possible and not care about the cache control that much? In that case, I would just go with Next.js. And if you would just like need a page that has a lot of business logic, basically that we want to like hide as much as possible, I would just go with Remix. Yeah. And actually, it's getting hard because like 20 days ago, actually Next.js posted a blog post with an RFC that also contains like the nested routes. So the Next.js is moving in this line of Remix as well. So the line will be less and less visible. So.
Ondřej, do you have any comment?
Yeah, I would say, like, from today's perspective, I would say if you're experienced and if you're an agency or you're happy to share code between projects, then I would probably go with Next by default, because it gives you all the options of the other generators. I don't know Remix that much, so maybe I'm wrong here. But in Next you can also do server-side rendering, and if you need it, from my point of view, a great advantage is the handling of traffic peaks. Because even if you have let's say a news site, and you need the fresh content to be there every second, and you have tens of thousands or millions people coming at the same time, in that case, you set up the ISR for 1, 2, 5, 10 seconds. You always get the fresh content, but even if you cache it only for 1 second, it can still save you 100,000 requests per second if you have really that big traffic peak, which is something that would be that could be possible with server-side rendering if you scale everything, and the database will probably be a little bottleneck then. But if you scale it to that amount, it's going to be expensive.
Yep.
Maybe a reaction to that? Yeah, basically Remix solves that by having the caches. So, as I mentioned, the web standards, it uses cache. So basically you can set stale while revalidate, and basically have it re-rendered on the backend side. They just like serve the old side. So it will basically work the same way as Next.js, but you have to control the cache headers a little bit more than in Next. So.
Okay, and it's a theoretical question, but we know how difficult is migrate from Gatsby to Next.js. Is there any way how to migrate from Next to Remix or from Remix to Next? Probably it will be complicated.
Yeah, it is a different structure of the route components basically, but that's not that big of an issue. It just like takes a little bit of rewrite. And actually on the Remix webpage there is a nice comparison between Next.js and Remix, where they basically took a web page written in Next.js, ported it into Remix as it is, and then did a rewrite into the Remix style of the development, and it actually was pretty much the same, but Remix at the end came out a little bit on top. So it is possible. It is not that hard, but it still requires some work. So yeah.
Okay. I have one question from some attendee sorry.
One question related to your question. You recommended to start with Gatsby. Do you have? Can you say there's a level that you should switch to Next? Which if this transformation, it's maybe difficult and it's maybe expensive, but can you say an example when it's definitely a benefit to switch from Gatsby to Next.js? In which case, on which level you should say it will be definitely benefit to switch to Next.js?
In my presentation, I actually outlined why we did that. And it wasn't our wish to do it, but we had to, because the problems were so imminent that we had no other choice. Yeah, we had to look for another platform. I don't think there's any definitive metric that you could say, like if you have 500 pages plus, then it's better to do Next.js. It depends on the project, really. You can have a project that has 100,000 pages, and it's perfectly fine with Gatsby.
Okay.
Because it depends on the frequency of changes, on what kind of pages you have there, on a lot of other functionalities. And some projects, even if they are fairly large, they just don't need that level of flexibility. Yeah. In that case, it's perfectly fine to use Gatsby, and the fact that you're using the local node storage is not that big a problem. While some other sites may have 100 pages, and if they are complicated, if they are expensive to build, then in those cases it might be beneficial to go with Next. Yeah, so it really depends on the project. That's why I said with Next, Next really asks developers to have a lot of knowledge. It gives you the options, but you need to know what you're doing. Yeah, it's like when you want to use an npm package, you also need to check a lot of things about the package to be able to safely use it. It's the same with Next. Like it gives you options, but you need to know from experience probably when and how.
Yeah. And I would just add that the decision process, if I should like go with Next.js or Gatsby or Remix, should happen beforehand, because basically you can achieve everything with each of the tools. It will just like work a bit differently. But when you come to the point where you actually have to switch, there has to be something really wrong. I actually had a project when we used Gatsby, and it was a website that was behind the login, and it was like a huge site with all of the logic happening on the client side. But we had it in Gatsby because that was the decision, and actually worked great. It wasn't that bad, but only the version upgrades were painful, but otherwise it was awesome. So you can basically like do everything with any of the tools.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm looking or I'm seeing a lot of companies having the same problems as we do. As the few years ago, Gatsby had so good marketing and developers were so excited of the platform that they just blindly use it for a lot of projects. And some of these projects are now approaching a stage, just like our website, where the problems are starting to be more and more painful. And in those, like a lot of companies are now also figuring out if we should switch to something else or we should keep using Gatsby. The truth is, if we didn't make the switch last year, we would probably, and we stayed on Gatsby, like 80% of the problems, as I said in the presentation, would probably be solved by now because the platform that they have has improved a lot, the Gatsby Cloud, I mean, and would probably solve a lot of our problems. But yeah, the fact that we did the switch, I think that we are on a safe side now.
Okay.
May I ask one question? Because front-end is in and so on, and so many people ask, for example, imagine that you have a boss in your company and he will come one day and ask you, build me static websites for our company in some framework. What would you choose, Gatsby or Next.js, which has bigger support with templates and for building static web pages and so on? I saw some templates that maybe from my point of view, it's more supported in this way Next.js than Gatsby. But what would you choose? Which framework? If you can't explain your boss that you can use 1000 solutions which are better in design and so on, but I heard so many customers that they want to have it in Gatsby or in Next.js because it's cool. But if I try to explain them that it's much more faster, do it in some framework with almost with no code, 1000 times nicer design, templates and so on, what would you choose? Which framework? Or if you want to have some nice template and so on?
Well, basically, if that would happen to me, I'd basically just like stop, get a meeting room and actually ask a lot of questions what it actually has to do, what it actually has to render and stuff like that. So that I actually had an idea what he actually needs. But if he would approach me, okay, Next.js on Gatsby, it would be like, what do you want from me? Am I here to like do actually like just like the coding job, or am I actually like an advisor that actually can help you with choosing the right product? Because it's a little bit specific question, and I'm not sure I can give you the answer if one or the other, because it always depends on the project and always depends on the consequences.
If I could specify, what would you choose? If, for example, barbershop, one page, typical, one form, scrolling, 3 services and so on. If you can imagine, what would be faster way if you choose template and so on in Next.js or in Gatsby? From your point of view, what would you implement it?
Well, depends where is your content.
Yeah, exactly.
It depends on a lot of things. Like if you're building a static site and the content is in the website, I would say it's comparable.
It's the same, almost.
Probably, but I wouldn't probably use any of those for that simple page. If it's like a one-pager,
me too. Yeah.
If it's a one-pager and you have a template for it, just adjust the HTML and publish it. You're done.
Yeah.
Basically, you choose WordPress and be done with it. Yeah.
I will do it the same way, but I had customer on event which was quite similar to Web Expo, but I can say which type of event was it. But he showed me the code and he had it everything like start component and everything was in wrappers and coded in completely in JavaScript styles and so on. And he didn't want to use static style, but everything like much more in code, like components and so on. But I didn't know what to do because code wasn't so good so much. But if I want to have it completely in TypeScript and so in components, I didn't know which framework. From my point of view, Next.js has much more beautiful templates and so on. If I was watching on the market and so on.
Well, you can take templates and apply it to any framework. Yeah, it's decoupled from it. So what we did in the past is we would just buy a template that's HTML, plain HTML, and apply it to any generator. So it's a different thing. Yeah, if there is a template on Next.js specifically for that framework, it's just because the designer preferred it that way. But I wouldn't make a platform choice based on the existence of a template.
Okay, thank you. Time is almost up, but we have a last question. It's related to this title, who is the winner? And the question from Ugur Oruts is, why to look for a winner when we can pick both of them depending on our needs and problems? I'm not sure if this is a question or answer.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's basically the answer.
Yeah.
But
and I think that this is a general answer for probably for everything.
Yeah.
So guys, thank you that you come. Thank you for the presentations, of course, and enjoy the rest of the conference and enjoy the party. And see you next time.
Yeah.
Thank you. See ya.
Thank you, guys.